Listen. This year we were able to catch around 50 movies at the Toronto International Film Festival, which is a festival in Toronto that covers films internationally. We hydrated on Tim Hortons, we got blazed, pizza, and got to experience a Woodstock level lineup. Like, you guys know I love Sundance if you've kept up with the channel. It has my first fest bias, but Tiff showcased some of the best of the decade. Tiff's merch shop should have collabed with Cactus Jack because they would have sold out as soon as that schedule dropped. I truly believe 2019 has surpassed 2014 as the best year in film this decade. So as with every fest must-watch that we do, we like to split it between those we'd rent to watch at home, those worth watching in theaters, and our absolute must-watches of the year, including two that even made it to our best of the decade list. Let me explain. So all of these in this section are the movies that we caught at TIFF that we think are worth spending money on as rentals, but I like mentioning all the ones that I may not have loved, just liked, because they may end up being your favorites. At first we have Tammy's Always Dying, which comes from actor-turned-director Amy Jo Johnson, telling the story of Kathy McDonald, who's burdened with taking care of her dysfunctional mother, only to realize that she may not be that different. If there's a running theme that you're going to notice in this year's TIFF list is class, and this being one of Canada's submissions into TIFF, boy do they make it look bleak. There's some humor in the movie, but not all of it hits as much as the ending does for a certain character. But with this being Amy's second feature, I am curious to see what her next is, especially if she can get another great performance like she did out of Felicity Huffman, who sadly couldn't be in attendance for the Q&A. Waves comes from director Trey Edward Schultz in what was pitched as an American tragedy, but also a coming-of-age story. It stars Kelvin, go watch Loose whenever you can, Harrison Jr. as the star athlete whose life starts to crumble around him as the music on his playlist gets louder and louder. To some, this thing is going to be a masterpiece, like something you've never seen before, but to others, it's going to feel way too experimental with his camera movements, strobing lights, blaring soundtrack. But as we said in our video for it, and we do have a bunch of little videos for these movies specifically, regardless of if it works for you or not, this is a movie that's going to get hard to get out of your head. The Vigil, on the other hand, wouldn't leave our head because it was so loud. Now, I'm not an old man yet, but the sound mixing on this thing was boosted up to 11. I heard from other screenings that it was similar, and I really do hope that they fix that because the story's pretty intriguing. It follows this guy short on faith and funds who decides to not only leave his Hasidic community, but because he still needs money, takes on a job as a shomer, which in Jewish tradition means he has to watch over the deceased body of someone in the community, but it ends up being an evil entity he faces. If you saw Manesh, it hits on similar themes, and even as the actor who was in that movie, but the way that they use horror elements to correlate with this guy's tragedy and something that happened in his past is pretty clever. Half the time, because the other time it's just like jump scares that they do. There are a couple of great scares, there's fantastic practical and CG effects. I just wish they cut out the jump scares and had enough faith in their story of this man's exodus. On the complete opposite side of genres, we have a political comedy called The Barefoot Emperor, which is actually a sequel to a 2016 mockumentary called King of the Belgians. Now, I haven't seen the first one, so at least I can say that the sequel stands on its own, even if the trailer for the first does look better. But pretty much Europe is now welcoming an emperor after the events of the first movie, which are summarized in the intro, and it satirizes how history is doomed to repeat itself. It's definitely heightened when you take into account Brexit and a lot of other world issues, but it's just a movie that decides to do that with a lot of, dancing for whatever reason. Beneath the Blue Suburban Skies feels like a stage play turned movie that follows Jennifer Eel as the suburban housewife with 2 adult children who don't do anything. She's also got a husband who's fallen into a never-ending routine, and honestly, she's been prepping to become an empty nester, and that right was stripped from her. Edward Burns stars and directs the movie in black and white to capture how mundane this family has become. But I thought it was funny. The acting all around, including their family friends, makes their random conversations engaging enough to make you care. You're just rooting for Tina to blow up. And if you like dialogue-driven films, then this would be a brisk afternoon watch that I can see a lot of people enjoying on Netflix. About Endlessness may soothe you to sleep, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I really like Roy Andersson's previous features, and it's crazy to think that this man owns 2 big studio spaces where he can painstakingly create these sets to be the exact way that he wants to, and he won't shoot until they're ready. I would highly recommend his previous ones just because I think that if you're new to his work, you may enjoy those a little bit more. This one kind of felt like it was pieces from a lot of other different movies that he wanted to make. Then the Q&A, they say that it was in fact that. but I do need to give this one a rewatch because his movies tend to be very, like, subconscious. Like, I don't want to sound too pretentious with it, but they're like experiences. They're vignettes that really seep into your subconscious. Hearts and Bones stars Hugo Weaving as a journalist with PTSD whose photographs cause him to cross paths with a Sudanese refugee who has a connection to those pictures. Fine performances, an emotional storyline dealing with him becoming a father, even at the risk of losing your partner, which was the part of the movie that I liked the most. But it did remind me of this picture by Kevin Carter, which I highly recommend reading up on if you haven't. The platform should be on Netflix soon, and it's a Spanish sci-fi where 2 people per level have to survive for roughly a month as food goes down the center platform. Thing is, while there is enough food for everyone on every level, the people at the top start overeating, and those in the 100s, and who knows how far it goes, tend to go starving. It's super entertaining, even though it leaves you with way more questions than it does answers. You Will Die at 20 is a Sudanese coming of death tale where the village's holy man predicts that a boy will die at 20 the day of his birth. The toll that takes on the boy religiously and socially feels like a curse, but once he turns 19, the decisions he starts making, it's not gonna be for everyone, but it made for a crazy movie. Color Out of Space stars King Cage in this H.P. Lovecraft adaptation where a meteorite ruins a family's home slowly with its trippy effects. Pretty much, imagine a much goofier Mandy featuring Chong, where Nick Cage's family just so happens to be inside that alien bubble from Annihilation where everything is changing. They just are unaware of it. And it has a couple of great Cage flip-outs. Weathering with You isn't as good as Your Name, but I feel like a lot of fans know that already. But Senpai is a better character than anyone in that movie for sure. In this one, Runaway goes to the city and befriends a girl who can manipulate weather. And then Makoto Shinkai hijinks ensue. It's still just as cute, you know, the pop music blasts after every realization a character has. And the animation is gorgeous, so I know for many of you, this is a day one in the theater. Disco stars Josephine Frida, who I know is in Scam, and here she's a competitive dancer who starts losing her edge, so her family starts questioning whether her faith is a factor in it. It pretty much treats religion as a drug, where instead of going to therapy when you need help, when you're feeling a little faulty, she takes a higher dose of religion till she goes from Stephen Furtick to a Midsommar camp. We weren't able to catch Maria's Paradise, which I know has similar themes, so I'm curious if anyone saw that one, how it deals with it, but to also see if their church also had an espresso bar. Pretty good movie, but I thought it was a little one-sided at times to religion. Sound of Metal stars Riz Ahmed, who starts losing his hearing, which is kind of a problem considering he's a heavy metal drummer. The movie runs 2 hours and 10 minutes and takes its time letting you experience what his routine is like, living out of an RV, and how drastically different it is when you strip away those everyday sounds you took for granted. Again, a little long for me, but I would say this one, Sound of Metal, and also Sound of Silence, which I believe is on Netflix already from Sundance. I'm curious to hear from the deaf community because I think Riz Ahmed gave an incredible performance in this one. Black Conflux can be seen as the answer to Joker and may rely too heavily on the be nice to psychopaths and maybe they won't become psychopaths, but I really like the patience it took when exploring 2 vastly different people living in the same small town in the 80s. One a girl exploring womanhood, one a man dealing with his masculinity, both feeling alone. The Lighthouse is so effective at being a feverish nightmare, I never want to see it again. We got this with Robert Pattinson, I kid you not, sitting a mere 10 meters from us, so I would know when something was going to happen on the screen that was bad because I would see the man flinching. And yeah, I felt just as crazy as Robert did watching the movie as he was in the movie. I love how some of y'all look forward to me not liking a movie because then you know to put it at your top. This would fall in the 4-act, 6-act type of movies that aren't my cup of tea, but I respect the filmmaking in them. I put it up there with Climax this year as being the movies that do everything right. They just, make me feel like the characters going through hallucinations minus the alcohol. It's a rent it from me, but I know it's a first watch for many of you, and it deserves to be seen on the tallest, best contract screen since, that's how your homeboy put it in the script. Clifton Hill feels like Mystery Murder Podcast, the movie. I'd prefer to go read The Body of Christopher Creed, but there are enjoyable parts in this movie. I love how it was pitched as the movie Niagara Falls doesn't want you to know about, since it deals with a murder cover-up in the off-season. a little goofy when it comes to the protagonist injecting herself in the case, and the ending has been done better elsewhere, but I did appreciate the David Cronenberg role in seeing him host a podcast, asking people to comment, like, and subscribe. That said, we do have a movie that I'm going to wrap this one on that we really don't want to recommend. It's not that it's bad, it's a really good movie. It's the official Dutch submission for the Oscars. It just made us feel terrible. Instinct tells the story of the psychologist who becomes obsessed with her newest patient, who just so happens to be a violent serial rapist about to go on parole. And according to the Tiff site, this was supposed to be audacious. They give a content warning. It asks the question, is there always a consistent distinction between victim and abuser, where intent is both unimportant and unclear? Yeah, this movie isn't going to be for a lot of people, but they were right. This film is taxing on the audience, the way the darkest parts of any movie involving rape can be. But I'm not going to say that it doesn't spark a discussion or be an angry one, but on that third act, you are both disgusted, but at the same time, surprised, appalled. I don't really know what words to say, but I would recommend another movie that we caught at Sundance called Queen of Hearts, which is actually Denmark's submission to the Oscars, which plays with the same power dynamics. It still may not be for everyone, but it's much less aggressive than this one over here. So add that one on your radar. But again, Instinct, it made us feel terrible, but I guess that's the point, so I can't fault it. Now we want to break down a really quick segment dealing with the shorts that we caught, some of which were good enough to even make Alina's top 10 up there with the full-length features. But we gotta start with the controversial one that Alina and Zach were able to catch, called The Raft. If you head on over to the Intercut podcast channel that we got, you'll hear Zach talk about how at his screening, this short actually caused a commotion amongst the other filmmakers and audiences. Tiff even had to apologize for this during the Q&A. I'm not gonna spoil what's on The Raft, but know that it's meant to be a violent satire from Germany, where this performance artist puts on a lot of bodies for people to see. It's disgusting. It pissed a lot of people off, and I'm curious because it's always very difficult to see shorts unless they get released on YouTube, but have this or don't have this on your radar? All Cats Are Grey in the Dark, Alina was able to catch. It's the complete opposite, but this one actually won the Shorts Award as it follows a cat man. Probably not recommended for dog people, but it is interesting when you search up the title and what it means to see where it actually originates from. Anna follows a single mother living in a war-torn Ukraine who decides to try some speed dating with the local Americans, and we really like the translator bit. Oracle captures anxiety through a child's perspective during a home renovation, and we thought it was pretty interesting. Why Slugs Have No Legs uses the metaphor of busy bees and its animation to tackle the monotonous lifestyle so many people find themselves in. Human Nature was pretty trippy because it flips animals as humans and humans as animals to kind of like showcase the love and harm we cause to each other, you know, even as pets when we're minding our own business. And then there's Nimic, which, well, I had played this one at the Tiff library, and we follow a cellist who encounters a stranger in a subway, and it was giving me this really weird emotion that only, of course, Yorgos did direct it. Of course he would. I would love to actually see him make an anthology of shorts, because this one, there's not really a plot as much as there is an emotion that's cycling through. I could see a bunch of his shorts, maybe like on Netflix or Hulu if he worked on something. In terms of our top shorts, I would put No Crying at the Dinner Table, which follows a family who confesses their secrets and perceptions on tape, only to then have those confessions replayed to all of them at the dinner table as they cry, you cry, and then it gets too blurry to read the credits. Flash is a beautifully animated short that has 5 women of various ages explaining their relationship with their bodies through stop motion, and Alina even compared it a lot to another one of her favorites called Hot Flash, which uses similar animation and deals with a weather woman trying to keep her cool during a hot flash, which just leads to more flashing. The other two that Alina was able to see, which she pitched to me, sounded incredible. Like, there's this one called Exam, which follows a girl who's forced to deliver cocaine. And I know that with shorts, they're very difficult to tease because they're already short films, but I'm just gonna give you a little bit of a spoiler because they're already talking about it on Letterboxd. Yo, when you hear the gulp, you'll be doing the complete opposite. And then there's the best one of them all, I'll End Up in Jail, which really could be a full feature. I really regret missing this one after she gave me the LME on it, because it follows a woman ready to leave her troubled life, only to rear-end herself into more problems once a murder occurs. But that murder divulges more and more secrets, and wow. We'll also be catching more shorts at the Chicago Fest and might even make a video at the end of the year covering the best ones. So if you're interested or have some suggestions, let us know. Now it's time to cover the ones that I think are worth watching in theaters. These are fantastic movies. Not our masterpiece, not the must-watches yet, but damn good movies, and there are a lot. Antigone. It's a modern-day adaptation of the Sophocles play as it follows an immigrant family in Montreal. It's also inspired by the police shooting of Freddy Villanueva, as Antigone, the main character, hatches a plan to break her brother out of prison in order to swap places with him. Does it get goofy at points? Yeah, with the prison switcheroo, like the main climax, it doesn't really make any sense, but everything after is fantastic. It's heartbreaking. It showcases the internet in an interesting way by not really displaying Snapchat, Twitter, or Instagram, but creating an aesthetic that gives you the feel of all of those while creating a movement for Antigone as she's put on trial. An intriguing adaptation that's also Canada's submission for the Oscars. 1982 is another movie that observes a private school in Beirut right in the midst of Lebanon's invasion that year. But what makes the movie so captivating is how it splits between the adults' political views on the situation and then the viewpoint of the kids who are more concerned about writing each other notes. Nadine Labaki does an incredible job as a teacher here, and what's crazy is that last year she directed the Oscar-nominated Capernaum and now may be starring in another one, as this is Lebanon's submission for this year, and it definitely earned its spot. A couple more of Alina's picks that I didn't get to catch, but she wanted to mention here are Sleepwalkers, an Argentinian film that tells a story of a mother and her family who, while on holiday with her in-laws, is pressured on how to raise their sleepwalking daughter. As secrets are exposed, one revelation pushes both mother and daughter closer than they would have ever liked. Zana, on the other hand, which really intrigued me, follows Loom's journey to conceive after losing her only child during the war, but the way she described the third act and how it flips your expectations makes me want to go see it, and I already know the ending. Hustlers is the female Wolf of Wall Street that, surprisingly, Alina didn't like that much, but I did, that deserved to be just as long to get the full story, to be honest with you. Waves is this intriguing A24 film that at one point was being pitched as a musical, which is interesting considering how its contemporary soundtrack comes off as a playlist for the movie that really feels like it's split in two parts, and I feel a lot of people are gonna like it. A lot of people aren't gonna. Pain and Glory has director Pedro Almodovar, who once didn't talk to Antonio Banderas for so long because he didn't like his acting in one of his movies. And now he's directing him as a director who also has to rekindle a relationship with his actor who he didn't talk to because he didn't like how he acted in his movie. All I'll say is that it has one of the most beautiful endings of the year. And if you have time to catch some more of Pedro's work, it's definitely worth it. Hope Gap also sees the director, William Nicholson, self-reflecting on his youth and his parents during their divorce. It has Annette Bening in one of the best performances of the year, and if she isn't nominated just so they can play that juicy delivery of a scene where she compares divorce to murder, then I'm gonna be really disappointed.
So it would be better for me if you were dead?
But I'm not.
It would be better in every way.
Sun Mother comes from the documentarian Manaz Mohammadi, who's making her fiction feature debut with this, and it's heartbreaking. Layla's a widow in Iran with 2 kids who has no choice but to marry a man in order to have funds for her infant daughter, but that means that her boy, because this man has a girl, has to be sent away to a deaf school where the teachers don't realize he can hear everything they're saying as he waits longer than expected for his mom to pick him back up. I haven't seen Iran's official submission, this one right here, but this one was great. Jojo Rabbit is Taika Waititi's anime adaptation. I'm just kidding. It's Taika's satire on World War II that shows through a child's perspective how easily it is to get indoctrinated with hate. I think it's hilarious. As I mentioned in the review that we made, I hate that it's up for the award circuit because I feel like it kind of takes away from the movie, or it adds a lot of more, I don't know, I feel like it's not able to be enjoyed as a comedy because people are now seeing it as having to be representative of something, but hey, it won the People's Choice at TIFF, so maybe it will go all the way to get a Best Picture nom. Now for the last two, we have Joker and Knives Out. Joker, has it already started a lot of film bro Fight Club-like fights discussing it? Yeah. Is this still a good movie? I think so, but between Phoenix's performance and the way it subverts DC characters from Gotham, I think it is a solid, if not troubled movie about one of the most iconic on-screen villains of our time. and Knives Out is one of the most entertaining movies of the year. Like, it doesn't have to top your end of the year list, but I can't see people being bored with this movie, you know? I think there's enough rewatch value within its script and performances. I love the underlying themes, and I think it's a better ending than what Ryan was going for with The Last Jedi. Now, it's time for the best of the best.
Do you know what that means? To forgive?
You having a good time?
Yes.
I utterly fell in love with this movie. This feels like a reverse Eternal Sunshine, where an elderly man tries to reconnect with his wife through this Westworld, Truman Show-like experience, where they recreate any moment. Like, it's very expensive, but you can create any moment or period you like, and this man decides to pick the day he met his wife in the 70s. If you like any of the movies that I had mentioned while describing this one, including Synecdoche, New York, I'm not saying that it's going to surpass any of those, but I feel like you would really like this movie, and I highly recommend it. This movie won't leave my mind, with seamless Lubeski-like shots that spin uncut inside their car, to a jarring middle that makes the second half feel like you're watching the sequel to Waves. Director Trey Edward Schultz and actor Kelvin Harrison Jr., who he collaborated with for the story, have crafted something that legit made me go, can they do that in a movie? If Heller doesn't get nominated for directing, I'm promising you right here in this video, I will not cover the Oscars next year. I would just pretend like the ceremony didn't even happen. If her previous 2 movies weren't enough to show you that she's a master at her craft, here she literally directs a feature-length Mr. Rogers episode about forgiveness that begins with a dude punching his father at his sister's wedding. This is the Mr. Rogers movie she made. Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers feels perfect, but it's even better that he's playing a supporting character, which I was surprised to see him as, but it's also fitting for a figure like Rogers to be the supporting character. He's being interviewed by Esquire, and that's pretty much the whole point of the movie that you're following. But if you haven't seen the documentary, we highly recommend that before you go watch this movie. We even got a video on it, which is one of our personal favorite LMEs because I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, and I believe Heller embraced that kindness without coming off too hokey and was able to capture the emotions of every single character and every scene in every frame. Ooh, this movie. Right off the bat, no, this does not have to do with the musical, even though it does get quoted. This is its own thing. This feels like a 2019 Lahane meets Training Day that has this energy that caught me off guard. You pretty much follow 3 cops who are dealing with different groups within this district, trying to navigate tensions, maintain a trust that they may have not earned, but that they also forget doesn't span to the younger generation. The movie never stops, but it's that third act that puts it on a whole nother level. Like, it's super engaging, and I think it encapsulates a way of thinking that a lot of younger people who are not as interested in picking a side that the older generation has told them they have to, and seeing how they will revolt. And I love this movie. While we have another French movie that we love more, it's still a great choice as France's official submission for the Academy Awards and one of our favorite movies of the year. At this point, I would be going on a whole spiel of Honey Boy, which we first caught at Sundance, but I already have my thoughts there. I just wanted to put it on your radar. But I'll use this to segue to the Trinity of 2019. Our 3 favorite movies that I don't think are going to be top for this year, because they're just fantastic. I cannot wait for you guys to see it. It's just a matter of which one ends up on top, right? But if you followed us for enough years, you know, we could care less about ranking. We really do not care about giving someone a number. I'm just glad we get to enjoy all 3 of these. Without a doubt, it's better than Good Time in my opinion, and this comes from someone who really likes Good Time. We have an entire video on this movie, so I'll just add that I agree. This is the best Passover movie out right now. Like with Midsommar, it may just be us who have a different definition of what's a therapeutic movie, but I could watch Sandler's grimy self-sputtering excuses for days, and this may be one of my favorite quotes of the year, if not top 5 for sure.
This is me. This is how I win.
Now, when it comes to these final 2, if you've seen our video right here, you would know that we've been going back and forth, Alina and I, on which is better. So I'll let the ladies go first. Portrait may be the best love story of 2019. Portrait's premise is pretty simple. An artist is commissioned to paint a wedding portrait for a young woman who refuses to be painted or get married. But what really makes the movie is how Celine Sciamma frames her shots. And what really makes her shots is the sweeping story that should be watched on the biggest screen to capture its beauty. And what really makes the script beautiful is how the two lead actresses play ping pong with this dialogue, serving each other some of the best rebuttals of the year. And then there's Parasite. I'm not going to reveal anything more than the logline here. Like I said, I'll be doing the spoiler video by the end of October. At this point, I think it's going to be a cliche movie. If you're on Twitter right now, you could see that. But I think that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's how good this is, that it's a cliche. I hope it nabs the Best Picture nom. I hope it changes the way people see subtitled films who may have not given them a second chance. I think this poster right here, which already resembles another masterpiece, is already iconic and will be remembered for generations to come, like a bunch of these posters right here. It's what Us wanted to be, and it's the movie that brushed up against Whiplash as being my best of the decade. And I'm so excited for you guys to watch all these movies. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Again, we have a list over on Letterboxd if you want to go check it out. We have the Intercut podcast segments on Tiff if you want to know a longer version of our thoughts. But I also recommend going to go check out our friend's Amanda the Jedi's video. She was also in Toronto and covered it. Carson Runquist's video. He was also in Toronto. Saw Lighthouse, I think, 47 times. But just catch as many people's reviews and festival stuff for movies to have on your radar. I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts if you were at TIFF or some of the movies we missed. I know we're doing Chicago. Not sure what other film festivals we may have, but if there's anything you think we missed, I know we have a couple right here. These definitely want to catch them as soon as possible. There were some other ones that we tried to get into, we just weren't able to, or we asked for screeners, but they told us we weren't big enough. So I'll buy my ticket and support the movie if the PR teams can't. But I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts. Any other movies that you recommend? Let me know down below. Until next time, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll send you a gem that is uncut.